Hey everyone, how are you? I'm Suraj. I'm going to talk to you about something that's less fun than Cheerios and music, which is politics and Twitter. And we're going to talk about the echo chamber. So everyone in this room, we're always talking about how we can use Twitter to convince people to buy our products. Well, in reality, we're really seeing that for politics, people use Twitter to reinforce their beliefs. So I'm going to start with how we got our news in the past. We used to read newspapers, listen to radio, TV. You were exposed to different viewpoints. You may have skipped over them. You may have skipped right to the sports page, but you're still exposed to different viewpoints. And what we're seeing now is that with personalization, like today HuffPost announced that they have a Facebook app talking about news just for you. We're being enclosed in the bubbles that personalization and algorithms give us where we see the same news. With Twitter, what we analyzed was that people do the same thing, except they do it actively. So here's a map of all 435 members of Congress. And what we did was plot them against each other as to how close they are in connections with their network. What's crazy is that after the fact, we painted them red or blue based on if they're liberal or conservative, and we found that they separate themselves out. And I call that the echo chamber. And what it does is that you're in one spot, if you're already conservative or already liberal, you start telling yourself crazy things, other people retweet you and believe it, and now all of a sudden you think that more people believe what you believe and no one else has any other thoughts, and you're in this echo chamber where you're like, make it, impossible to compromise. And we see that already. So here's an example. That's the number of medical organizations that think that the HPV vaccine can cause mental retardation. It's 0. No legitimate scientist believes that. However, if you look at the wrong part of the echo chamber, someone does believe it. And in fact, enough people in one area believe it. So this plot, we plotted 2.1 million Twitterers and looked at, whether they're conservative or liberal and how they talk about HPV and mental retardation. And we find that by ideology, the red line represents conservatives. A little blip on the right-hand side where they positively mention it, they're actually saying that this is actually possible. And again, we know from a fact standpoint that it's not. And that brings me to this false equivalencies thing. If you bring two different viewpoints onto the news and you say, oh, some people believe it, you start creating in people's minds a question about the underlying fact. The fact is that Gardasil does not cause mental retardation. However, some people believe it. And that brings me to my favorite quote, which is, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts. The reason this is important is because, a democracy requires you to have a shared set of facts. Because if we're not going to be talking about, whether it's good to have the state mandate HPV vaccines, and we're still just talking about whether it's safe, then we're not really arguing about anything of significance. We should be questioning whether it's all right for the state to say you have to have a vaccine, but we shouldn't be talking about whether it's safe or not. Another example, 97%. This is the number of scientists, climate change experts, and people that believe that man causes climate change. We're not saying that, these are the number of people who say we can reverse it or anything like that. We're saying this causes it, including the American Petroleum Institute. But in the wrong echo chamber, if you look at one side, which is to the right and bottom, the conservative angry mentions of climate change, almost nobody believes that man can cause climate change. And you put that on the news, and it's like putting someone with a spherical Earth next to this Ahmadinejad on a flat Earth. It's like saying, this is an equal, valuable argument to be having, when in reality we should be discussing whether it's advisable to take on the cost of climate change stuff. So what I'm saying here is that the echo chamber allows people to turn opinions into facts because they, see it from a lot of people in their community, and that's all they see. And they, resurrect invalidated theories. My point here is not that Twitter is the enemy. In fact, Twitter is awesome. We all know that, right? We use it to build community. It works for the Arab Spring and Tea Party. You can really harness it well if you use it correctly. But people don't always use it correctly. And what politicians should be doing, and maybe this would be a more fun topic for people if we didn't hate them so much, is that they should be bringing us together by talking about what makes us similar rather than exploiting these narrow echo chambers on the far right and far left or wherever they sit and using them for stupid purposes. So here's a good example. Here's a display on jobs. People all across the spectrum right now, and everyone out here in this room probably believe that jobs is a really important issue, willing to do much about everything to make sure that we have more in this country. And we find that on Twitter. We analyze this and we see that. And basically, if people were to get on board with Twitter and social media in general and not amplify what the polls think, but actually bring us together, we would actually have a better political system, I think, and people would like him more.